Hey, welcome to Dan's Model Works, and we're back at the clutter zone. And it's time for part 4 of our Tamiya original issue F-16 fighter. As I already explained, the tooling for this was done back in 1976, and it seems that Tamiya only really released it once. So it's quite possible that this kit dates all the way back to 1976. So where are we at? As you can tell by the nice glossy finish, we're ready for decals. But before I get on to that, I want to do some detail painting inside the landing gear bays, as well as adding some detail to our landing gear themselves. And hopefully we'll be able to wrap this up in part 4. So our first step on our landing gear, which by the way has already been airbrushed flat white, is going to be to paint the oleos and the hydraulic rams here. I'm going to be using Model Master Chrome Silver. In an ideal world, I would have the energy to bare metal foil those, but that's not going to happen. I'm not that ambitious. If I was planning on putting this on the contest table, then I probably would bare metal foil them, but it comes down to who am I trying to impress? Myself, really, and I'm going to be happy with the Chrome Silver. There's the oleo on the front landing gear painted up. And there's the oleos on the rear landing gear, the main gear painted up. Now I know that most of the hydraulic piping and everything in the landing gear bays is supposed to be white, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some flanker blue, which is a very, very pale blue. I'm just going to do the hydraulic lines in that, just to kind of get them to pop a little bit more. I'm going to be putting a very light gray wash in here to bring up the detail anyway. Just kind of experimenting and flying by the seat of my pants here. Now I've tried to introduce a little bit of color inside these landing gear bays, just with the hydraulic tubing. And I think most of our color and warmth is going to come from the washes that we're going to apply. We'll see what happens. It's amazing what a wash will do for parts that even don't have a lot of detail on them, although these landing gear aren't too bad. This was just simply to me a German gray wash. I thought black might be a little too dark. And I also put it in the landing gear bays as well. And I think it turned out okay. So there's our front landing gear and the doors installed. And like everything else on this kit, it has really, really good positive mounting lugs for everything, including the doors themselves. However, if you ever do get a hold of one of these kits and build it, I should mention that the very front part of the door, there's a little segment from the side. I'll just right down here, where it's almost kind of like the guy who designed this part didn't talk to the guy who designed that part, because you can install one or the other, but not at the same time. So I had to take away maybe about 1/4 inch of the front of this lower piece. You can't see it once you've got it all together, but basically the two parts interfere with each other. So here's the main gear doors in place. I'm hoping that they open wide enough that actually when I go to put the main landing gear in, that they're not going to interfere. And once again, Tamiya has a very positive attachment point for these doors. It's not like a lot of kits where they say, yeah, glue them here, and you've literally got just the parts fit where they touch. These actually go on quite firmly. And disaster. I had the whole landing gear assembly probably 90% of the way in place, had everything all lined up, and then I was just applying a little bit of pressure to put the main the main leg in this part. When the tweezers slipped, snapped off the main leg, and I've removed these doors just to make it easier to repair the damage. Grr, double grr. Alright, the damage is repaired. Sort of, kind of, if you squint. And here's the scene I was hoping to show you about an hour ago, before the cursing started. I will have to touch up this little piece right here, because that represents the outside of the aircraft, and it's part of the landing gear that everything anchors onto. One of the sidewinders cleaned up pretty good. The other one had a substantial sink mark that had to be filled. So I'll have to sand that before I can paint. There you can see it all sanded up, but you can certainly see the size and shape of the sink mark. Alright, let's recover our decal sheet from the front window. And hopefully it's fully bleached out. There's still a tiny bit of yellowing, but it's not as bad as it was. And I know from doing the instrument panels that they're not going to break up on me. The icing on the cake, putting the decals on. It's interesting to see how small these markings are. And of course, being in full color. Whereas we know in the 80s, we went to the low visibility gray markings that were considerably larger. So obviously, even in the 70s, they were thinking, is it really a good idea to have such huge, big, bright, colorful markings on a fighter? So anyway, there's first decal on. Identifier markings that tell you which decal are which are pretty small and just a slight bit blurry. So I think there's going to be a little bit of guesswork going on here. And believe it or not, that's all the markings you can see from the underside. You got a few there. Got a couple marks there. There's not a whole lot more on the top side either. And there's our upper surfaces with all the decals applied, including all 18 of the no-step walkway decals that go around the wing and fuselage. So we're getting close. One little chore that is yet to be done is there's basically a framing hoop that goes up around on the canopy. And I've masked off about 90% of it. Masking this front bit here is going to be a little difficult just because of the way tape behaves on a curved surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to freehand this part of the arch, and we'll see how horribly that turns out. Well, that figures. The part I did freehand turned out fine. The part that was protected by masking tape had bleed through. Guess I better do some quick damage control on that. Phew! Quick application of Tamiya thinner and a Q-tip, and I managed to clean off the bit that had bled underneath. That was close. So my plan for the landing lights was I was going to paint the back side of them silver and leave the lenses clear, and then I was going to put a second coat on the back side of white or gray or whatever. However, because Tamiya molded these in a smoked plastic, it ended up not looking very bright at all. So I ended up just painting the fronts of the lenses silver, and then I'll go back and paint the rest of the light housing light gray. It's not perfect, not quite the finish I wanted, but short of making my own lenses, which I don't feel like doing, maybe I'll do that on some future project. It's probably the best of a bad situation. I must be getting close to completion because I'm finally daring to put the pitot tube on. Now, notice this has kind of a little secondary one off to the side. I think that was a feature of the prototypes, which once again is one of the reasons I'm choosing to do it in one of the prototype schemes. I don't know all the differences between the prototypes and the in-service aircraft. The sidewinders have been glued on. Not much left to do. I don't know if anyone noticed, but the little antennae that come off the top of the pilot seat, they broke off while I was assembling the model. So I had to recreate them a second time, only this time instead of using brass and super glue, I used plastic and white glue. So they'll be touched up before I dull coat everything. And if we look at the landing gear doors, we can see the landing lights have been glued in, as well as touched up and painted. Okay, I think all my touch-ups and all my washes are pretty much done. I'm going to have to commit to dull coating sooner or later, and I think it's going to be sooner. There's the heads-up display glued in place. And the kind of yellowish stuff, that's white glue that'll dry clear. And I think I'm going to wait until that dries before I put the canopy on, just so that the glue has a place to dry and evaporate to. There, as you can see, the white glue is dried clear. Still a little bit of smidge there that's going to clear up over time. But now it's finally time to glue the canopy on. So let's get on with that. Alright, I was going to film me putting the white glue on the underside of the canopy, but I was afraid that the glue might skin over before I had a chance to put it in place. Now, for those of you who are experienced with using or putting transparencies on models, you'll know that as tempting as it is to use super glue, it's usually a big no-no unless you've got lots of ventilation, because the super glue, when it goes off, it gives off a film which usually deposits on the inside of your transparency. So you can use it if there's lots of ventilation, but a closed canopy like this, it's a no-no. The nice thing about white glue is it'll be strong enough to hold this on, and if there's a couple blobs, you can see there's a couple inside there, they'll dry clear and you won't be able to see them. So we're almost done. I think I got to paint some position lights on the wings, and that'll be it. And it's done. Well, or at least I think it's done. I'm pretty sure there's something I've forgotten. At any rate, I'm calling it done. And as you can see, I still don't have that fancy turntable yet I want to get. Anywho, this was Tamiya's original release of the F-16. Basically the 1976 prototype. And of course, this was what they anticipated the combat scheme was going to be. As we all know, it ended up being something a little different. And the most striking difference, I think, is the fact that the national markings are still in color, whereas, as we know, the US eventually went with low visibility markings. I ended up doing a little bit more scratch building than I thought I would have to do on this. I certainly thought I thought it was pretty much going to be a shake the box kit. I wasn't expecting to be ending up making an engine front or anything like that, but I certainly did enjoy it. And here's a shot of the underside. I know the landing gear bays can be a lot more cluttered than this, but it certainly looks the part, basically. And here's one more shot looking right down the throat, and you can see the front of the engine right there. I think it was worth the effort to build it. So thanks for watching Dan's Model Works, and until next time, just keep on modeling.